So they are here to talk about, they are here to discuss the article, the 19th century. There are various plans in this article that is about the sort of the entire century is covered as it shows the evolution of the system from how it went from a feudal society to a capitalist society. But there are also various other strands to it, and so we have picked up on one of them, and we are trying to identify how concept propaganda was sort of used and how from saying that okay, feudal society would actually be better, they went to say that they began to accept the capitalist system. So Vignesh should take you through.
So basically, what was the advent of industrial revolution? That is the basic point. Initially, it was the basic division was like the people who pay the tax and the people who receive it, and it went on to the priorities become more economic rather than more social, as being it social or moral. As Samuel Taylor College says, the society was disintegrated into mutually exclusive entities, and it was not a group. After the advance of the romantics like P.B. Shelley and Wordsworth, they believe people have become more machine oriented and they are not emphasizing anymore on the human values and so. The advent of French Revolution is that the British people started believing that the riot and mob was sort of the birthright. And the politicians in Britain started using it for their vested interests. And to quote an example, Lord Garden used it to get his bill against the Catholic tolerance using these riots. The factory owners also sort of use this to widen the divide more by putting up more stricter rules again onto the workers. Karl Marx actually says that the bourgeois class depends on the most important thing for them is the capital, and to acquire that, what they need to do is to get more cheap labor, and for that they paid only the bare minimum wages to the workers. So this created this resulted in a lot of poverty, which forced them to make up trade unions, which started going against the individual bourgeois. And there was also a controversial belief that the driving force behind the history were the bourgeois, but it was actually the working class or the proletariats. There were some literates like Charles Dickens who were trying to create a new thing like showcasing the present day problems by the literature. But the contemporary artists, they focus more on the lesser ideas like horror and the lesser themes. It was believed that ballads and other modes of propaganda were used by the working class people who were more interested in things like things which were scandalous rather than the ones which were needed for growth and which should create more consciousness among the people. And they also tried to map the lower class people to the savages of the Africa, but the actual problem was that it was the reason why this happened was due to the advent of the industrial age. Due to the socialization, due to the advent of socialism, the unions also had a complete change. So initially the unions were more like a center where we can donate or receive donations. But now, after socialism, it became a center of change, and where people become more verbal and they start going for strikes, and also to ask for better wages and for better conditions. So I will continue the point. Okay. I consider that advertising cultural elements can be used to try to calculate the 16 marks in order to cover the setting. So, okay, what we
we need to understand the context in which this article is set. The French Revolution had just ended, and as a lot of you know, there was no revolution in India, but that did not mean there wasn't any tension or there wasn't any simmering discontent in the within the working classes. And yet there was no revolution, or that did not happen. And the transition or the revolution from the feudal society to the capitalist society did occur, and despite there not being that much improvement in the conditions of the working classes. So we know how to understand this, and that is where all these cultural elements would come in, including literature, architecture, etc. And we'll see how it fits in the modern context. So very simple thing. So there are various other classes, but the classes on which we are focusing are the working class and the middle class. So the working class itself had a division that there were the skilled workers, the artisans of the sort of previous era who still retain their skills, and the unskilled workers were typically the factory workers who did not who weren't very skilled. So there was a tension, there was a conflict of interest between the unskilled workers and skilled workers, and also between the bourgeois and the skilled workers and the bourgeois and the unskilled workers. So just see what it was. So between the bourgeois and the artisans. So okay, there was a movement in the 19th century which is called the Chartist movement, which was comprised of the working class people. Their aim was not to sort of rebel against the government, but to become a part of the system like the parliament and have the right to vote, etc. So in that sense, they had a common theme with the bourgeois. This Chartist movement was, the artisans were part of the Chartist movement, wanted these principles of suffrage, etc. But when you come to the cultural context, where they are taking, the article describes the literature of a period, and it is here that we find a difference. The artisans, what they wanted from the literature was self-advancement, how to, how to grow one's personality, how to grow as an individual. But all the bourgeois care about was, they just wanted increase in productivity. The literature, whatever that was being, even the fictional literature that was around at the time, the bourgeois just wanted it to help increase the productivity of the artisans and the unskilled laborers. So that was a conflict of interest between those two. Then an important thing which we need to consider here is fiction as such. We talked about imaginative fiction, and there was also fiction which was which belonged to the first class fiction. But more importantly, what happened was the focus in literature shifted from content to how to actually use it to further your interest. This part happened during the Chartist movement. So that is the first part. Then we come to the artisans and the unskilled machine workers. So their views are also different. Now, what did the artisans want? They wanted to convey an image of the class. They wanted to convey a more positive image of the class rather than just a dirty machine worker. But the unskilled machine workers, for them that was their identity. So when you say a honest, hardworking factory worker, that is the identity of the unskilled worker. So even as the artisans want to break this stereotype, and in this political context they want to push something else through, the unskilled workers, it is their identity and they are not sort of comfortable with losing that. The other point is their differing views on literature. He talked about Dickens and all the other authors. The other authors mainly catered, there was horror, romance and fantasy, etc. So this type of fiction was considered to be a lower form of fiction which only entertains the lower classes. But the artisans, as I already mentioned, they were interested in advancing the self, and that was their thing. So, and lastly, a lot of us have talked about this, the bourgeois and the unskilled workers exploitation. So there is this concept called civilization of the working class. So this is not something which is just done like running an ad campaign or just through posters. This happens organically. They create a belief in the working class that the activities that you indulge in, like brawling or drinking and just being happy, their methods of recreation, even those methods of recreation are not practiced by the civilized people. So this mentality is being conveyed to these working class through literature, even through dramas and many other aspects. And another important factor is the classification of the poor. This sort of comes in the, it's like an ideology versus a contradiction. As you mentioned, what they did was they typically compared the working class with the African laborers who used to come from the African laborers, and they used to say that you are like savage and barbarian, so you need to be actually civilized. But in fact, the civilization or whatever the system that they are creating, which will talk about the extracting of the surplus, perhaps that is what is actually creating the poverty. So that and classification of the poor means they sort of classify the poor, and of course not all the people from the working class are actually poor. So they sort of target a particular section of the people and somehow try to bring in a mentality that it is your individuality that is actually making you poor and the system has nothing to do. So these are the kind of elements that were used throughout the 19th century to propagate the mindset. So, but what we need to know as such is, at the start of the 18th century, you had romantics and medievalists actually saying that perhaps a feudal system is actually better for you because you are not just treated as a machine. Even if you are a worker, you have some other social relations, somebody cares for you. These are the aspects that were being focused on at the start of the 18th century. But what happened towards the end of the century is that he talked about unions. So now people have accepted that capitalism is okay for us. Only what we need is better pay, better working conditions. So this transition without any revolution is what is the main focus of the article. So from and what are the elements that are used for this has been discussed. So now we'll see in the modern day context some examples to further this.
Now in the context of the article that you given in the 19th century, there the instrument used was literature, but that doesn't always have to be the case. What's necessary is that the central idea remains the same, which is that we've got classes, we've got internal struggles between classes, we've got conflicting interests between classes. Now with that in mind, when we've got two different classes with conflicting interests, one of them can try to exploit the other class. How? By using some form of channel of culture. It can be literature, as we saw in the 19th century example, it can be movies, it can be music, it can be anything. Now when we come to the real life examples, the examples that we chose, we thought to go beyond literature, we thought to go in other realms. I've got one marketing example and I've got an example with news media. Now we'll look into those into more detail. Now when it comes to the marketing thing, we need to look at it from a broader perspective. We need to, if we zoom out the view a bit, we see that it's about the conflicting interest between the consuming class and the producing class. The producing class wants to maximize its profits, while the consuming class will always go for the best product. That's what they want. They want to consume the best product. Now, the producing class, when we see a situation where multiple brands are owned by the same umbrella corporation, what they do to minimize cannibalism, what they do is they go for different positioning of the two brands that they own. So what happens because of that is that they've got discrete target groups to work with. They can concentrate on each of the target groups separately and they can maximize their profit directly. Now I'll go into more detail into that, but let's hit the other one also. In the news media, now the war of Afghanistan and the war of Iraq started with September 11. Now what happened then? What happened after that was that America went to war with Afghanistan, and to distract the American people from their failure in that war, they launched into another war, the war in Iraq. Now what they did to handle the social unrest, what they did was something very different from what they had done in the Vietnam War. During the Vietnam War in the late 60s and the early 70s, there was widespread social unrest. There was the anti-war sentiment was very, very strong back then. But it didn't happen in the 2000s. Now why? Because there are theories, there are even some would say conspiracies, theories based on the fact that there was collusion between the media and the political class. But we can actually, if we go deeper, we can actually see the links that are right there between the political class, the Senate, the House of Representatives and the media organizations. When we go into Now the two classes in conflict over here are the political class and the working class. And in America today, the working class is the middle class. It is the most populous class that they have. If they've got the plumber Joe in support of them, then they can do anything. Then they basically got the opinion of the majority with them. Now what they did was that we need to look at the tabloids that were prevalent at that time. We need to look at the news media outlets that were prevalent at that time. In the American audiences these days are over-entertained, they are overexposed to issues that don't really matter. They've got people like Rupert Murdoch, the infamous Rupert Murdoch of News of the World fame, telling them that these things are important when they are really not. The real issues are the issues that actually affect them in real life. That they've got two more expensive wars running over there in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're winning those wars, but then winning is a vague term over here because they're losing men every day, and yet the local people are not rising up. Now, how they did this? The most popular TV outlet during the time which covered the Iraq and Afghanistan war most well was the Fox News Net, followed by the CNN. Now, the CNN has a more of a reputation of an unbiased news outlet, but then channels like Fox, channels like CBS, what they did was they pushed the pro-war mentality. Studies in 2003 by, I think it was FAIR. The FAIR organization conducted a study in 2003 which showed that the people that get the experts that they got talking on their channel about the war, they are massively pro-war. And what else they did was that, the reason behind this is actually that the people who owns Fox News Network is again Rupert Murdoch. He's got massive Republican ties, he's got extensive connections with George Bush, he's got extensive connections with the entirety of the Republican Party, the conservative base of Americana. So what he did was push the pro-war agenda. They made it such that if you are anti-war, you are anti-American. Reporters were fired based on that. Reporters were actually punished and fired based on their reporting. If they said anything too anti-American, that is anti-war, they were punished. So what he said, Bush said that after 9/11, go shopping. He didn't say, okay, we need to support our troops, we're sending troops over there, get ready to get some casualties because we're going to lose troops over there whenever he send them in a combat situation. What he said was go shopping. Why he said this? Because he knows that the general people, the mainstream people can be persuaded if they can be bombarded from all directions by irrelevant news. They can be distracted very easily, they can be sort of brainwashed, they can be persuaded into following news articles and sensational news articles and pulp news, celebrity gossip columns and everything. They can be distracted from the real issues. But then again, it can also be argued that the establishment has a valid reason for doing this, because there was a study conducted in 2009 that showed that when anti-war sentimentality rose in the heart of the US nation, it was always it always coincided, or it was rather always followed by greater amount of insurgency in Iraq and Afghanistan. So basically what they found was that with the apprehension of a foreseen US backing out withdrawal of troops, the insurgents actually rose up. So the political establishment can also be said that they had a point in this, that keep the people fed with things that don't matter so that we can do our war in peace. Now coming to the marketing perspective. Now I won't go much into detail in this. We've all enjoyed and endured so many marketing crashes over the years that this Lux versus Dove thing is pretty much, we all know the various positionings. What matters, the main thing is that Lux chose to give a brand positioning which was very, very distinct from what Dove did. They've got different SKUs, they've got different celebrities coming in over the years. The beauty soap for these celebrities, the most happening celebrities. A lot of that stuff changes, but the underlying message is always the same. You are identifying, you are aspiring to be one of those celebrities. It's a very materialistic way of looking at it. It's a very, you are idealizing a physical ideal that you're never going to reach. Now Dove, what they do is very, very different. They talk about inner beauty. They talk about different ideals in women who have just entered their newly entered their jobs. They target a different target group altogether. While the target group of Lux is basically more of a rural, younger women. Dove targets the older, more mature women. So that with taking their different targeting approaches, what they do is they segment the audience and they can target each of them, and they can do specific things with those target audiences which can maximize their sales. These are the typical Dove commercials that we see. It's all about inner beauty. It's all about it's the exact opposite of Lux. It's about not conforming to an ideal. Be who you are, inner beauty. Next. What matters is that not what the brands are individually talking about. What matters is the brands, even though they are owned by the same umbrella corporation, HUL, they are talking about different things. Why? So as to divide up the market, so as to be able to concentrate differently on the market, so as to further their own gains. So the people don't even know that they are actually buying the products of the same corporation, HUL. They don't even know that. They don't have to know that. They're not getting the best product necessarily, but they are getting exploited. They are getting sort of manipulated into buying into this thing that HUL actually cares about you, that Dove actually knows you and all. So that's the underlying thing. We've got the corporations on one hand, and we've got the consumers on the other hand.